Our first scene of the Interview with the Vampire Season 3 trailer sees Louis and Daniel having dinner in a fancy hotel Louis undoubtedly owns, talking about the Interview with the Vampire book and how both their lives have been going since the novel's publication. Louis communicates his readjustment, interacting with the human public has been slow and largely still private. Daniel, still new to his life as a baby vampire, has been having the time of his life and excitedly brags to Louis of the book deals and interviews he's been dodging left and right, only to reveal to Louis the purpose of this dinner, not just to catch up, but to communicate that a studio reached out to him for a docu-series sequel of Interview, this time following Lestat's autobiography, and that Daniel is considering it. Louis swallows and looks away, visibly uncomfortable at the mention of Lestat's name, and Daniel, too eager and hiding it badly, then changes the subject to ask Louis if he's finally read his book and what he thought of it. I personally love this scene, as you can see the anticipation, nerves, and desperate need for approval in Daniel's eyes as he asks this question of Louis. For me, this proves my theory that Louis and Daniel have been spending far more time together than we've seen of their interactions on screen. Louis has potentially undertaken the role of adopted maker to the young fledgling in order to keep Daniel safe and teach him how to be a vampire, especially in the wake of Armand's continued parental neglect. Louis responds to Daniel by stating he didn't like Daniel's too honest portrayal of himself in the novel, that being forced to look at himself and his actions in a mirror made him uncomfortable. Daniel laughs this off and responds that Lestat had a similar reaction while reading the book, especially while reading the scene of himself and Claudia's interaction in the train car before flipping over the book and revealing 2 pages blacked out in thick, dark ink. We then flash to a scene of Rockstar Lestat in his dressing room, appearing visibly inebriated while his new song plays in the background. We then get a scene of Lestat as a young boy stabbing at his food like it's his father's heart, before switching to a scene of Lestat showing off his new boots that say "Hate Me" on them, in case anyone in the audience still had any doubt as to how dramatic Lestat is. We then flash forward to our current timeline with a scene of Lestat in full stage light makeup, gazing forlornly out a window, before switching to a scene of a younger adult, human Lestat holding a gun out at someone. Next, we have a scene of Lestat on a party bus, before switching to a scene of Lestat, defiant and ready to fight, fangs bared, flipping off someone off-screen. Next, we have a scene of Louis, or possibly Akasha, or possibly a human destined to be Lestat's dinner, being escorted into Lestat's penthouse, followed by 2 people carrying a coffin behind them. Make of this scene what you will. Honestly, I'm stumped. We then have a scene of Lestat and his bandmates heading to Lestat's dressing room while Lestat carries an unconscious human woman in his arms. Our next scene is Lestat biting into a woman's thigh while having sex. I don't think this scene is particularly important, but I do think it's a subtle hint to a similar sex scene, that happens between Lestat and a human woman in Memnoch the Devil, which made me laugh. We then have an adorable scene between Louis in Lestat's dressing room, where Lestat's covering Louis's face in foundation, presumably mid-conversation. We then have a scene of Lestat strutting across the stage like a peacock to thousands of adoring fans, while his mother, Gabriella, watches on in abject horror and awe of her son. We then travel back in time to a scene of France, where a crowd of adoring French aristocrats are showering Lestat in praise for his theatrical performance. We then cut to a chilling scene of Magnus, Lestat's maker, staring out at him through a row of candles, before transitioning to a scene of fledgling Lestat and his first husband, Nicky, breaking up because of a series of atrocious mental health and horrible misunderstandings. We then have a montage of Lestat living his best rockstar life, before being hit directly in the face with the heartbreaking realization that while Louis was in his penthouse trying to play Stepford wife with Armand, Lestat was also hallucinating Louis, probably for years, and still is. We then have a few scenes of Lestat's past as a human, including his mother and father arguing and his brothers beating him, before flashing back to Armand in present day sitting in what looks like a gymnasium, not beating the beige allegations, Lestat playing Nicky's violin, and Daniel looking like he deeply regrets agreeing to the docu-series adaptation of The Vampire Lestat. Our next scene is the context of the big conversation between Louis and Lestat, presumably early on in the beginnings of Season 3. Lestat is wearing shades, and Louis is looking at him adoringly before the simple bliss of their reunion is detonated by Lestat being catty. Louis holds his composure and answers Lestat's passive-aggressive questions calmly and directly, demonstrating a level of growth and empathy he did not have during his interview, showcasing how much Daniel's influence and Louis's own ability to self-reflect has benefited him. Lestat curses at him in French, and Louis responds by gently caressing the arm of his lawyer, who on closer inspection I now realize is a vampire. Lestat's lawyer, deeply uncomfortable and entirely done with her day, tries to steer the conversation back to the present topic. Next, we have a few scenes of Lestat and Louis getting into a car accident before flashing to a scene of Raglan James and Rashid talking to someone, presumably Daniel. We then have a scene of Louis and Lestat on an airplane before switching to a scene of Claudia, now a ghost, forever haunting the narrative of this story. We then get a scene of what looks like Louis and Lestat fighting before switching to a grisly image of Lestat's face in the aftermath of his car accident. Then we get a couple of uncomfortable scenes of Lestat and Daniel peeing, which just left me with so many questions about the molecular biology of Anne Rice's vampires. Also, Armand is very clearly stalking Daniel throughout this season, so that's nice to see. We then get a flashback of Lestat's past being changed into a vampire by Magnus, and Lestat was, in fact, sharing his torture chamber with a room full of rotting corpses. We then get a flashback of a no-handed Nikki cleaning the theater of Armand's Paris coven, meaning we're going to get more context to Lestat and Armand's relationship, what really went down in the theater of the vampires, and why Lestat and Armand have such a complex relationship. We then get a flashback scene of a human Lestat being dragged out of his bed by Magnus kicking and screaming before switching to an idyllic scene of Lestat playing guitar in his penthouse while a dead body lies on his floor. Next, we have a scene of Lestat and Gabrielle walking into a strip club in the 70s before flashing to a picture of a screaming baby Jenks, one of Lestat's superfans, hopping up on stage with Lestat and then immediately being bitten by the territorial vampire. In the book, Queen of the Damned, Baby Jenks is a fledgling vampire who belongs to a biking coven known as the Fang Gang, and the woman who's attacked by Lestat is an entirely separate character named Jessie, who works for the Talamasca. I do wonder if this change to Baby Jenks' character will mean she has a larger role in the series, and how Lestat changing her into a vampire and her becoming another of his fledglings will affect his dynamic with Louis. Next, we have a scene of the memory of Magnus coming back to haunt Lestat before flashing to another hallucination of Louis haunting Lestat as he's playing Nikki's violin. Next, we have a scene of some creative executives toasting their good luck that Daniel accepted their docuseries idea before flashing to a scene of a young human Lestat going out to hunt some wolves with his dogs. We then get a scene of Daniel walking down a darkly lit corridor backstage at Lestat's concert before flashing to a scene of a blood-soaked, manic-looking Louis shushing someone in a room that also appears to be in the concert venue of Lestat's show. We flash immediately to who that person is. Bruce, the vampire who abused and tortured Claudia, so it's nice to see justice will be served this season. Next, we see a scene of Armand staring wistfully at Daniel in the bathroom before switching to a past scene of Gabriella being turned into a vampire and feasting on what appears to be her own family outside of Lestat. Next, we have a scene of human Lestat sobbing and staring fearfully up at a person I also think is Gabriella. Gabriella and Lestat have a deeply abusive, psychosexual, incestuous relationship with each other, which shapes Lestat's character deeply, and this dynamic will be explored in Season 3. Next, we have a scene of Gabriella making out with who I believe is Maharet, before flashing to a blood-soaked Lestat taking a shower, before cutting to another scene of Lestat throwing a party at his house. Next, we have a scene of the vampire Sam Barclay, in full disguise, looking down at Lestat's concert from an upper balcony. Sam is working for the Talamasca as a spy and is currently in active hiding from Lestat, Louis, and Armand due to his past actions at the Theater of the Vampires. Next, we have a scene of Louis drenched in blood as Bruce's body explodes around him, but I think this might be a fake-out scene, announcing the arrival of Akasha, with Bruce being the first to die. Next, we have a scene of Lestat in full drag, singing before flashing to another party scene where we see the vampire Dr. Farid again, along with Lestat hallucinating Nikki and his father. Next, we get a scene of Daniel opening the interview between himself and Lestat before switching to a scene of Lestat burning in the sunlight. Next, we get a graceful shot of Lestat sitting for another interview session with Daniel before setting on our last image of an irritated Lestat telling the rest of the world to pound sand. And that's the trailer for The Vampire Lestat. What did you guys think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below, and if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!